I stopped breathing the moment I saw the handwriting. It was shaky, slanted to the right, written in that distinct old-fashioned cursive that they don't teach in schools anymore. The ink was a faded blue, the kind you get from a fountain pen that is running dry, scratching against the thick brown paper of the parcel. I knew that handwriting better than I knew my own mother's signature. I had spent the last 6 months decoding it on crossword puzzles, on angry notes regarding the cafeteria pudding, and on the margins of dog-eared romance novels. But seeing it now, sitting on the reception desk of the palliative care unit at 11:45 p.m. on Christmas Eve, felt like a physical blow to the chest. It felt like a violation of the laws of nature. Because the hand that wrote my name on this box, Maya, nurse, room 101, was currently 6 feet under the frozen ground of the St. Jude's Cemetery, 3 miles away. Mrs. Elara Vance had died on November 28th. I was the one who called the time of death. I was the one who closed her eyelids, those striking, unnervingly pale blue eyes that always seemed to be looking right through my scrubs and into my soul. I was the one who packed her meager belongings into clear plastic bags for a next of kin who never showed up. So, logically, physically, medically, this package shouldn't exist. "A courier dropped it off 5 minutes ago," the night receptionist Brenda said, chewing her gum loudly, oblivious to the fact that she had just handed me a ghost story wrapped in brown paper. "Said it was scheduled for delivery specifically for tonight. Priority shipping. Weird, right? Getting a gift from the dead?" Brenda laughed, a hollow sound that bounced off the linoleum floors, but I couldn't even force a smile. My fingers hovered over the package, trembling. The air in the hospital corridor suddenly felt colder, the artificial heat from the vents doing nothing to chase away the chill that was spreading from the base of my spine to the nape of my neck. The hospital at night during the holidays is a strange place. It's a liminal space, suspended between the joy of the world outside and the suffering inside. There were tinsel garlands wrapped around the hand sanitizer stations, and a sad plastic Christmas tree blinking rhythmically in the waiting room, casting long, eerie shadows against the beige walls. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic beeping of heart monitors and the distant hum of the elevator. I picked up the box. It was heavier than it looked. It didn't rattle. It felt dense, solid, like a brick of secrets. I pulled it close to my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Why now? Why me? Mrs. Vance and I had been close, yes, in that unique, intense way a nurse bonds with a patient who knows the end is coming. But this felt different. This felt premeditated. The label didn't just say my name, it had instructions written in that same shaky script underneath the address, to be opened only when the clock strikes midnight, alone. I walked down the hallway toward the break room, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the quiet ward. Room 101 was empty now, the door wide open, the bed stripped and sanitized, ready for the next tragedy. But as I passed it, I could have sworn I smelled her perfume, a heavy floral scent of lavender and old paper that used to cling to her cardigans. I stopped in the doorway, staring into the darkness of the room where she had spent her final days. For a second, I expected to see her silhouette sitting in the armchair by the window, staring out at the parking lot, waiting for a visitor who never came. But there was nothing, just the sterile emptiness. I tightened my grip on the package. Whatever was in this box, it wasn't just a thank you gift. Mrs. Vance wasn't the type for sentimental gestures. She was sharp, guarded, and filled with a quiet, simmering regret that she never vocalized. She was a woman of secrets. And tonight, it seemed, she had decided to share one with me. To understand why my hands were shaking so violently, you have to understand who Elara Vance was, and more importantly, who I was when I met her. I wasn't just a nurse doing rounds. I was a fugitive from my own life. I had taken the night shift at St. Mary's specifically to avoid the holidays. while the rest of the world was drinking eggnog and arguing over politics at family dinners. I was changing IV bags and checking vitals, hiding in the sanitized routine of the hospital. My own family was a fractured mess. A father I hadn't spoken to in 10 years, a mother who vanished when I was a toddler, leaving behind only a blurred Polaroid and a lingering sense of abandonment. I had built a wall around myself, constructing a life of professional detachment. I was good at my job because I cared, but I never let it get personal. Until Mrs. Vance. She arrived in early June, transferred from a general hospital with a diagnosis of terminal pancreatic cancer and a file that said no known relatives. She was small, frail, with skin like parchment paper, but her presence was massive. She commanded the room, not with volume, but with a terrifying stillness. The other nurses were intimidated by her. She refused to engage in small talk. She didn't want pity. She didn't want prayers. She just wanted to sit by the window and watch the world go by. But with me, it was different. From the very first day, when I came in to adjust her pillows, she latched onto me, not physically, but visually. She tracked my movements with a hunger that unnerved me. It wasn't the look of a needy patient. It was the look of someone trying to solve a puzzle. Maya, she had said that first week, her voice rasping like dry leaves. That's a beautiful name. Who gave it to you? I had told her it was my father. She had nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, and looked away, hiding a flash of something in her eyes. Pain, recognition, anger, I couldn't tell. Over the months, our dynamic shifted. I became her confidant, though she rarely spoke about herself. She wanted to know about me. She asked questions that felt casual, but were surgical in their precision. She asked about my childhood in Ohio. She asked about the songs my father used to hum. She asked if I remembered the smell of my mother's hair. I found myself answering her, pouring out memories I hadn't touched in decades, lulled into a false sense of security by the rhythm of the monitors and the intimacy of the night shift. I told her about the locket I lost when I was 7, the one with the engraving of a bird. I told her about how my father used to cry in the kitchen when he thought I was asleep. I told her about the emptiness of not knowing where I came from. Mrs. Vance would listen, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow, absorbing every word like she was starving for them. Sometimes I would catch her crying silently, tears tracking through the deep lines of her face, but whenever I asked what was wrong, she would snap back into her stoic shell. Just old age, dear. Regrets are the only things that grow heavier as you get smaller. I thought she was mourning her own life, her own lost chances. I was so naive. I didn't realize I wasn't just a nurse to her. I was the subject of her study. I was the ghost she had been waiting for. The break room was empty, illuminated only by the harsh fluorescent light over the kitchenette. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, 11:55 p.m. Outside the window, snow was falling in thick, lazy flakes, blanketing the city in white. It was the kind of Christmas Eve you see in movies, perfect and serene, contrasting violently with the turmoil inside my gut. I sat down at the small, wobbly round table and placed the package in the center. The brown paper was crinkled at the corners. I noticed there was no return address, just my name and the stamp of a local law firm I didn't recognize. This had been arranged. This was a legal execution of a personal will. I took a deep breath, the smell of stale coffee and disinfectant filling my lungs, and reached for the scissors in my pocket. I sliced through the tape. The sound was a harsh rip in the silence. I peeled back the paper, revealing a simple, sturdy wooden box. It was made of dark oak, polished smooth, with a small brass latch. It looked old, Victorian perhaps, something that had survived wars and floods and fires. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. I glanced at the clock. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes. I should wait. The instructions were specific, but why? What difference did 2 minutes make to the dead? I couldn't wait. I flicked the latch. It opened with a soft click. I lifted the lid. The first thing that hit me was the smell. It wasn't the hospital smell. It was the scent of lavender and old paper. Ilara's scent, but deeper, richer, mixed with something else. Vanilla? Pipe tobacco? It smelled like a home I didn't have. Inside the box, nestled in dark velvet, were 3 items. Just 3. There was no money, no jewelry, no deed to a house. The first item was a photograph. It was black and white, square, with scalloped white edges, typical of the 1950s. I picked it up by the corner, careful not to smudge it. It showed a young woman standing on a porch. She was laughing, her head thrown back, the wind catching her dark hair. She was wearing a floral dress with a cinched waist. I squinted at the image. The woman was beautiful, radiant with life, but it wasn't the woman that made the room spin. It was the porch. I knew that porch. I knew the chipped railing on the left side. I knew the specific pattern of the wood grain on the front door behind her. I knew it because I had a picture of myself, aged 5, standing on that exact same porch in the exact same spot. It was my father's house, the house I grew up in, but I didn't know the woman. My father had burned all pictures of my mother. He said it was too painful to keep them. Was this her? Was Ilara Vance showing me my mother? My hand shook as I turned the photo over. On the back, written in that same blue ink, but stronger, younger, less shaky, was a date, December 24th, 1958, and a name, not mom, not wife, just the day everything broke. I put the photo down, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. My mind was racing, trying to connect the dots. Ilara was in her 80s. In 1958, she would have been, what, 20? 25? Was she a friend, a neighbor? Why did she have a photo of my father's house? I reached for the second item. It was a small, leather-bound journal. The leather was cracked and worn, the pages yellowed with age. I opened it to the first page. It wasn't a diary in the traditional sense. It was a log, a record. June 12th, 1985. She learned to walk today. I watched from the park bench. She has his wobble. September 4th, 1990, first day of school. She cried at the gate. I wanted to run to her. I stayed in the car. December 25th, 1995. I left the red bicycle on the porch. I saw him bring it inside. He told her it was from Santa. It was from me. I dropped the journal onto the table as if it burned my fingers. 1985. That was the year I learned to walk. 1995. I remembered the red bicycle. It was my favorite gift. My father had told me he saved for months to buy it. He lied. The realization washed over me like ice water. Ilara Vance hadn't just met me 6 months ago in this hospital. She hadn't just been a lonely old lady I was comforting. She had been watching me. For my entire life, she was the shadow in the corner of my childhood, the stranger on the park bench, the car parked down the street. I felt a surge of nausea. This wasn't a gift. This was a confession of stalking, or something worse. Had she hurt my family? Was she the reason my mother left? Anger flared in my chest, hot and protective. I had held this woman's hand as she died. I had wiped her brow. I had grieved for her. And all this time, she had been keeping score? I looked at the third item. It was a sealed envelope. Thick, cream-colored paper. On the front, just one word. Truth. I snatched the envelope up, ready to tear it open, ready to confront the ghost of Mrs. Vance with whatever madness she had written down. But before I could break the seal, the break room door swung open. Maya, you in here? It was Dr. Evans, the night shift resident. He looked exhausted, a stethoscope draped loosely around his neck. He blinked at me, sensing the tension in the room instantly. Hey, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. And is that the package Brenda was talking about? I instinctively covered the photo and the journal with my arms, a primal defensive gesture. I'm fine, David, just personal stuff. He lingered in the doorway, his eyes darting to the wooden box. Right. Well, sorry to interrupt, but the patient in 204 is crashing. We need hands. I'll be right there, I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Okay, hurry. He turned and left, the door swinging shut behind him. I was alone again, but the atmosphere had shifted. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was oppressive. I looked at the envelope in my hand. Truth. I couldn't open it now. I couldn't read it and then go try to save a life in room 204. I needed to be composed. I needed to be a nurse, but I couldn't leave the box here. Anyone could walk in. I shoved the photo and the journal back into the box. I took the envelope and slid it into the deep pocket of my scrub top, right next to my heart. It felt heavy there, burning against my skin. I locked the wooden box and shoved it into the bottom of my locker, piling my coat on top of it. As I ran down the hallway toward room 204, the adrenaline of the emergency mixing with the dread in my stomach, I realized something terrifying. The context of my life, the orphan narrative I had told myself, the story of the girl abandoned by a mother who didn't care, was a lie. Mrs. Vance had been there, watching, recording, sending bicycles. Why? Why watch from the shadows for 30 years only to reveal yourself after death? I reached room 204, snapping on gloves. My mind split in two. One half was calculating epinephrine doses. The other half was back on that porch in the photograph. The shift was a blur. A chaotic montage of alarms, frantic families, and the grim reaping of death that always seemed to work overtime on holidays. But through it all, the letter in my pocket felt like a brand. Every time I moved, it brushed against my ribs. Truth, truth, truth. Finally, at 4 a.m., the ward quieted down. The patient in 204 stabilized. The families went home or fell asleep in the waiting room chairs. I slipped away, not to the break room this time, but to the chapel. It was a small, non-denominational room on the first floor, usually empty at this hour. I sat in the back row. The stained glass window was dark, waiting for the sunrise. I pulled the envelope out. My hands were stained with iodine and dry skin, shaking worse than before. I broke the wax seal. It crumbled like dried blood. I unfolded the letter. There were pages and pages. "My dearest Maya," it began, "if you are reading this, I am gone, and the cowardice that ruled my life has finally been defeated by the finality of death. You asked me once if I had children. I told you no. That was the biggest lie I ever told you. I didn't have children I could keep, but I had you." The world stopped. The hum of the hospital vanished. "I am not your stalker, Maya. And I am not just a stranger who loved you from afar. The woman in the photo is not your mother. That woman is my sister, Clara, and she is the one who stole you from me." I gasped, the sound loud in the empty chapel. My vision swam. "Your father didn't tell you the truth because he didn't know it all. Or maybe he knew too much. But you need to know why I let you go, why I watched you learn to ride a bike from behind a tree instead of holding the handlebars. You need to know about the fire in 1958. And you need to know that the ring you wear around your neck, the one you said was the only thing your mother left you, fits the key I taped to the bottom of this box." My hand flew to my neck, to the simple gold band I wore on a chain. I had worn it every day since I was 16, found in a box of my father's things. I scrambled to grab the wooden box which I had brought with me. I turned it over. There, taped with masking tape, was a tiny, intricate silver key. I looked at the ring. I looked at the key. The letter continued. That key doesn't open a door, Maya. It opens the evidence locker at the precinct where your mother's death was ruled an accident. It wasn't an accident, and I didn't kill her, but I know who did. I stood up, the letter crumpling in my fist. The chapel seemed to spin. My entire identity, the abandoned daughter, the nurse with no roots, was dissolving. Mrs. Vance, the quiet lady in room 101 who liked lemon drops and crossword puzzles, was claiming to be my mother, or my savior, or a murderer, and she had just handed me the weapon to solve a cold case that I didn't even know existed. The sun was starting to rise, casting a blood-red light through the stained glass. Christmas morning had arrived, and with it, the end of my life as I knew it. I sat in that chapel for what felt like a lifetime, the stained glass casting long, bloody streaks of red and blue across the pews as the sun finally broke the horizon. The hospital was waking up around me, carts rattling, nurses laughing at the station, the smell of burnt coffee drifting down the hall, but I was suspended in the vacuum of 1958. I turned the page of the letter. Ilara's handwriting, usually so shaky in her final days, was firm here. This part had been written years ago. It had been waiting for me. To understand the end, Maya, you must understand the beginning, the letter read. Clara and I were not just sisters. We were reflections of a broken mirror. Clara was the gold. I was the brass. She was the one who married James, your father, the handsome, ambitious architect who wanted a perfect life to match his perfect drawings. I was the wild thing, the embarrassment, the one who ran away to the city and came back with a swollen belly and no ring. When you were born, you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I named you Maya because it means illusion in Sanskrit, and I knew deep down that keeping you was a dream I couldn't afford. I stopped reading, my thumb tracing the word James. My father. The man who raised me with a quiet, stoic sadness. The man I had stopped speaking to because his grief for his dead wife felt like a wall I couldn't climb. I had always pitied him. I had always thought he was the victim of a tragic accident that took his beloved Clara, but Ilara's words were painting a different portrait. Clara couldn't have children. It was the rot inside her perfect marriage. When I came back home, destitute and desperate, she didn't offer me help. She offered me a deal. She would pay off my debts. She would give me a fresh start, but I had to leave you. She said I was unfit. She said I would drag you down into the gutter with me. And the worst part, Maya, she was right. I was 22, addicted to bad choices, and penniless. I looked at James's big house on the hill, and I looked at my cold apartment, and I broke. I gave you to them. We signed papers that weren't legal, but were binding in blood. I became the aunt you never saw. She became the mother you adored. My tears were falling freely now, hot and angry. I had been sold, a transaction. My entire existence was a receipt. But the deal had a condition. I was allowed to visit once a year. On your birthday, Clara agreed. But Clara, she changed. Motherhood didn't soften her. It sharpened her. She became possessive, paranoid. She thought I was going to steal you back. By the time you were 3, she had banned me from the house. She told James I was using drugs again. I wasn't. She poisoned him against me. And then came Christmas Eve, 1958. I could feel the tension in the ink, the pressure of the pen digging into the paper. I came to the house that night not to take you, but to give you that red bicycle. I left it on the porch, but Clara saw me. She came out into the snow. She was screaming, hysterical. She said I was trying to ruin her life. She said if I ever came back, she would tell the police I had broken in. She was holding you, Maya. You were crying in her arms, terrified of the woman who was supposed to be your mother. That's when I saw the bruises on your arm, fingerprints. Small, dark circles on your toddler skin. I froze. I pulled up the sleeve of my scrub top. There were no marks there now, of course, but the phantom pain of a memory I didn't know I had throbbed in my arm. I lost my mind. I screamed that I was taking you. I lunged for you. Clara ran back inside and locked the door. I pounded on it until my knuckles bled. James wasn't home yet. He was at a late meeting. I sat on the porch in the freezing snow, waiting. I wasn't leaving without you. Not anymore. The deal was off. When James finally pulled into the driveway, I thought, here is the savior. Here is the man who loves his daughter. I ran to his car. I told him everything. I told him about the bruises. I told him Clara was unstable. I turned the page. The next paragraph was short, brutal. James didn't look at me. He looked at the house. He looked at the perfect life he had built. He told me to get in his car. He said we would go inside together and sort it out. I trusted him. We went inside. Clara was at the top of the stairs, holding you like a shield. She was shouting things that didn't make sense, and then it happened. The hospital announcement system dinged. Code Blue, room 305. The sound jolted me, but I couldn't move. I was trapped on that staircase in 1958. It wasn't an accident, Maya. The police report says Clara tripped on a loose carpet runner while carrying you. It says she fell down the stairs, twisting her neck, shielding you with her body so you survived unharmed. That is the story James told the police. That is the story the coroner accepted because James was a respected man and I was the unstable sister. But here is the truth. James didn't try to talk her down. He walked up those stairs, calm as ice. He reached out for you. Clara screamed that she would take you and leave him. She threatened to expose his corrupt business deals, the bribes he took to get his buildings approved. She knew everything. She was leverage. And James, he didn't grab you. He pushed her. The world tilted on its axis. My stomach lurched violently. I dropped the letter on the pew. He pushed her, Maya, with one hand, a hard, calculated shove to the chest. I watched her eyes go wide. I watched her lose her footing. She didn't shield you. She dropped you. You fell onto the landing, screaming. She tumbled backward, down the full flight. I heard her neck snap. It sounded like a dry branch in winter. It was the loudest sound I have ever heard. My father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, the man who sat by my bed when I had the flu, the man I had idolized as a tragic widower. He wasn't a widower, he was a murderer. He looked at her body at the bottom of the stairs. Then he looked at me. I was paralyzed with shock. He walked down, stepped over her body and picked up the phone. He didn't call an ambulance. He called his lawyer. Then he looked at me and said, "If you say a word, Ilara, I will tell them you pushed her." Who will they believe? The architect or the junkie? He made a new deal with me right there, over his wife's cooling corpse. I would leave town. I would never claim you. In exchange, he would pay me a stipend every month, and he would raise you well. If I ever broke the silence, he would frame me for the murder. He kept the carpet runner with his fingerprints on it, and he kept a letter I had written threatening to take you. He had insurance. I stood up, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. The air in the chapel felt suffocating. I took the deal. I saved your life by leaving it. I watched you from the shadows for 30 years, Maya. I saw you become a nurse. I saw you become kind despite him. But now I am dying, and James is old. The threat holds no power over a dead woman. The key in this box opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Inside, you will not find money. You will find the original reel-to-reel tape recording I made of our conversation that night, hidden in my coat pocket. I recorded him confessing, Maya. I recorded the deal. I grabbed the key from the box. It was cold and sharp. James is not your father. He is your jailer. He stole you twice, once from me and once from the truth. Go to him. Ask him about the red bicycle. Ask him about the night the music stopped. The letter ended there. Signed, your mother, Ilara. I shoved everything back into the box. I didn't care about my shift. I didn't care about my job. I walked out of the chapel, through the lobby, and out the automatic doors into the biting cold of Christmas morning. The snow was blindingly white, pure and clean, covering the dirt of the world. But I knew what was underneath now. I got into my car, a beat-up Honda Civic that groaned as I turned the key. My phone buzzed with texts from the head nurse asking where I was. I threw the phone into the passenger seat. I drove. My father still lived in the same house. The house on the hill. The house with the porch. The house with the stairs. It was a 40-minute drive through icy roads, but I drove like a maniac. Every tree I passed, every house with Christmas lights blinking in the dawn, felt like a lie. The whole world was a stage set, and I had just seen the backstage. My mind was a chaotic loop of memories being rewritten. Memory, Dad crying at the kitchen table. Reality, guilt or fear of being caught. Memory, Dad forbidding me to go into the attic. Reality, was that where he kept the insurance? I pulled up to the driveway. The house looked majestic, covered in snow, a wreath on the door. It looked like a Christmas card. It made me want to vomit. I grabbed the wooden box. I didn't need a coat. The rage was keeping me warm. I marched up the steps, the same steps Ilara had sat on in 1958. I didn't knock. I still had my key. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine. It was warm. Classical music was playing softly from the living room, Bach, his favorite. It was a scene of perfect domestic peace. "Maya?" His voice came from the living room. It was frail now, scratchy with age. He was 75. I walked into the room. He was sitting in his leather armchair by the fireplace, a blanket over his legs. He looked small. He looked harmless. He smiled when he saw me, a genuine brightening of the eyes that broke my heart into 1,000 more pieces. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I didn't think you'd come. You said you were working." He started to rise, leaning on his cane. I didn't smile back. I stood in the archway, clutching the box against my chest like a shield. "I was working," I said. My voice sounded dead. "I had a patient, room 101. He froze. He was halfway out of the chair, and he just stopped. The smile didn't drop instantly. It withered slowly, like a flower in a frost. He sank back down. "Room 101, he repeated. "The hospice ward?" "Her name was Ilara," I said, stepping closer. "Ilara Vance." The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. He gripped the arms of the chair, his knuckles turning white. I don't know that name." "Don't," I whispered. "Do not lie to me, not today, not ever again." I walked over to the coffee table and slammed the wooden box down. The sound echoed in the high ceilings of the room he had designed. I opened it. I took out the photo. I took out the key. "She's dead, Dad. Or should I call you James? She died a month ago, and she left me this." He stared at the items on the table. He wouldn't look at me. He was breathing hard, a wheezing, rattling sound. "She was crazy, Maya," he rasped. "She was a drug addict. She abandoned you. She was my mother," I screamed. The sound tore through my throat. "And you knew it. You bought me, and then you killed her sister to keep me." "No!" he shouted, slamming his cane on the floor. "It was an accident. Clara fell." "I have the tape, James," I lied. I didn't have the tape yet. It was in the bank, but I needed to see his face. "I have the recording from that night. Ilara kept it. She kept it for 30 years. That was the blow that killed him. I saw it in his eyes, the defeat, the terrifying realization that his perfectly constructed life had finally collapsed. He slumped back into the chair, looking suddenly ancient. "Clara," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Clara was going to take you away. She was going to leave me and take you to Europe. She was unstable. She was hurting you. So you pushed her? I tried to stop her, he cried, tears streaming down his face. I tried to grab her. She pulled away. She fell. Ilara saw you push her. Ilara saw what she wanted to see. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. Maya, look at me. I raised you. I loved you. I protected you from a mother who didn't want you and an aunt who was a junkie. I did everything for you, every sacrifice, every lie. It was all for you. You let me believe I was alone, I said, my voice shaking. You let me believe my mother abandoned me. You let Ilara die alone in a hospital room 3 miles away while you sat here listening to Bach. That isn't love. That's ownership. I picked up the key. I'm going to the police, Dad. I'm going to give them this key, and I'm going to give them the journal. He stared at me. For a second, I saw a flash of the man from 1958, the cold, calculating architect. He looked at the fire poker next to the hearth. He looked at me. The silence stretched, thin and tight as a wire. This was it. The moment where he decided if I was his daughter or just another witness. Maya, he said softly, you're my daughter, please. No, I said, I'm Ilara's daughter. I turned to leave. My back was to him. I expected a blow. I expected him to grab me. My muscles were tense, ready to fight. Maya, wait! I stopped at the door. I didn't turn around. The red bicycle, he choked out. I waited. I didn't buy it, he sobbed. I broke it the night she died. I took it to the basement and I smashed it with a hammer because I couldn't stand looking at it. I bought you a new one the next day, a blue one. I closed my eyes. I remembered the blue bike. I remembered asking where the red one went. He had told me Santa made a mistake. Thank you for the truth, I said. Finally. I walked out the door. I didn't go to the police station immediately. I sat in my car in the driveway, watching the house. I saw the curtains move. I saw him watching me. I picked up the phone. I dialed 911. Emergency, the operator said. I'd like to report a murder, I said. It happened 30 years ago, but the evidence is in my hand. As I spoke, I saw the front door of the house open. My father walked out. He wasn't holding a weapon. He was holding a framed picture. He walked to the edge of the porch, the scene of the crime. He looked at me one last time. He lifted the picture. It was a photo of me as a baby, and held it to his chest. Then he sat down on the steps, right where Ilara had sat in the snow, and put his head in his hands. He was waiting for them. The silence of a snowfall is usually peaceful, but the silence after a siren cuts is heavy. It presses down on your ears. I watched from my car as the patrol cruisers pulled up, their blue and red lights flashing against the pristine white snow, painting the perfect suburban house in the colors of violence. I watched as the officers approached the porch cautiously, hands near their holsters. I watched as my father, the architect, the pillar of the community, the man who had taught me how to tie my shoes, slowly stood up. He didn't resist. He turned around, placed his hands behind his back, and let them click the cuffs onto his wrists. He looked small. He looked relieved. He didn't look at me as they led him past my car. He kept his eyes on the ground. I think that was his final act of parenting, sparing me the sight of his shame. The next few weeks were a blur of depositions, lawyers, and the cold, fluorescent reality of police precincts. I handed over the key. I handed over the journal. And then, 3 days after Christmas, I sat in a small, soundproof room with a detective and a district attorney to listen to the contents of the safety deposit box. The tape recorder was old, a reel-to-reel player they had to bring up from the archives. The technician threaded the magnetic tape, which Ilara had preserved in an airtight bag for 3 decades. The wheels began to spin. A hiss of static filled the room. Then, voices, ghostly, tinny, but undeniable. You can't keep her, Clara. She's my daughter, That was Ilara. Her voice was young, desperate, vibrating with a strength I hadn't known she possessed. "She's James's daughter," came the sharp retort. "Clara, my mother." Her voice was brittle, high-pitched. "And James belongs to me. This house belongs to me. You are nothing but a mistake we made. I'm taking her. The deal is off." Then the sounds of a scuffle, the heavy thud of footsteps, the wind howling. The front door must have been open. And then James's voice. Calm, terrifyingly calm. "Clara, stop screaming. The neighbors. I won't stop. I'll tell them everything. I'll tell them about the bribes, James. I'll burn this whole life down before I let you take her." A pause, a silence so loud it made the detective look down at his notepad. Then a gasp, a shuffling sound, a sickening wet thud. Silence. Then James again. "Ilara, pick up the phone." The tape clicked off. The room was silent. The detective looked at me with pity in his eyes. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. I just felt a strange, hollow lightness. The weight of the mystery was gone, replaced by the weight of the truth. It was heavier, but it was mine to carry. James pleaded guilty. He didn't fight it. His lawyer said he was tired. I think he was just done with the performance. He had been acting the role of the grieving widower for 30 years, and the curtain had finally fallen. He was sentenced to 25 years. Given his age and his failing heart, it was a life sentence. I visited him once, just once. It was February. The visiting room was grey and smelled of bleach. We spoke through a glass partition. He looked frail, the prison jumpsuit hanging off his frame. "Why?" I asked him. It was the only question that mattered. "Why did you keep the lie going? Why didn't you just tell me when I was older?" He looked at his hands. "Because I was a coward, Maya. I convinced myself I was protecting you. But I was protecting myself. I liked being the hero of the story. I liked being the father who saved you from the fire. If I told you the truth, I would become the villain. And I couldn't bear to lose your love." "You lost it anyway," I said softly. He nodded. "I know. I saw it in your eyes on Christmas morning. It was the only justice that mattered." I left him there. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out into the parking lot, took a deep breath of the freezing air, and felt the first crack in the ice that had encased my heart. The house on the hill was seized by the state for restitution and legal fees. I didn't want it. I didn't want the furniture, the paintings, or the memories. I took only one thing, the old photo album from the attic. I went through it, peeling away the layers of history. I found pictures of Clara, stiff and posed. I found pictures of James, looking away from the camera, and tucked in the very back, hidden behind a wedding invitation, I found a Polaroid. It was blurry. It showed a young woman sitting on the grass, holding a baby. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at the baby with an expression of such fierce, consuming love that it made my chest ache. It was Ilara and me. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted, revealing the brown earth, then the green shoots of new life. I went back to work. It was hard at first, walking past room 101, but eventually a new patient moved in, a nice man named Mr. Henderson who liked baseball. Life, as it does, filled the vacuum. But I had one last errand to run. On a warm afternoon in May, I drove to St. Jude's Cemetery. I parked the car and walked up the hill to the paupers section, where the headstones were small and uniform. I had arranged for a new stone for Ilara. It had been installed the day before. I stood before it. The granite was smooth, cool to the touch. Ilara Vance, 1938, 2024, mother, guardian, truth. I knelt in the grass. I placed the wooden box on the grave. I had filled it with new things, a copy of my nursing degree, a picture of me smiling, a real smile, and a letter written on hospital stationery. "Hi, Mum," I whispered. The word felt strange on my tongue, but also right, like a key fitting into a lock. I'm sorry it took me so long to see you. I'm sorry I was just your nurse. But I know you heard me. I know you felt me holding your hand at the end. You saved me, Alara. You didn't just give birth to me. You waited 30 years to give me my life back. You gave me the truth, and the truth broke me. But it's letting me build something new, something real. I stayed there until the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows across the cemetery. I told her about my day. I told her about the bad coffee in the break room. I told her about the birds singing in the trees. I talked to her like a daughter talks to a mother. As I stood up to leave, a glint of light caught my eye. It was coming from the next row of graves. I walked over. It was a small, forgotten grave from the 50s. Someone had left a toy there. It was a small, red metal bicycle, a miniature ornament. I smiled, a real smile. It wasn't a sign. It was just a coincidence. But in a world where dead women send packages and keys open cold cases, I was willing to believe in coincidences. I walked back to my car. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I carried her with me now. Not as a ghost in a hospital room, not as a secret in a letter, but as the blood in my veins. I started the engine. The radio was playing a soft jazz tune. I turned it up. I rolled down the windows and let the spring air rush in. I was 35 years old. I had no parents. I had no childhood home. I had a difficult job and a messy history. But as I drove out of the cemetery gates and onto the main road, merging with the traffic of the living, I realized something profound. I was free. The package from Room 101 wasn't a burden. It was a permission slip, permission to stop being the abandoned girl, permission to stop being the daughter of a tragedy, permission to just be Maya. And that was the greatest Christmas gift she could have ever given me. Some secrets are buried deep for a reason, but the truth always finds a way to the surface, sometimes in a whisper, sometimes in a roar, and sometimes in a brown paper package left at a nurse's station on Christmas Eve. We all carry boxes we are afraid to open. We all have rooms we are afraid to enter, but if Alara taught me anything, it's that the things we hide from are often the very things that will set us free. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt the weight of a family secret or the power of a truth revealed too late, share this with someone you trust. And if you want to hear more stories about the hidden lives of the people we pass every day, the quiet patients, the silent neighbors, the keepers of secrets, subscribe to the Triumph Stories. Because everyone has a story. You just have to be brave enough to open the box.